G'day, it's Cliff Morgan here. Thanks for stopping by for this quick video. Have you ever tried to address an issue with your team only to have it resurface at some other point, some other later time, and often resurface again and again and again? See, each time you address it, there are external influences at play. Things that are outside my control seem to be getting in the way. You feel like you never really get people to accept responsibility for what's going on. You know, they promise, I'll try and do better next time, but the accountability just never really seems to land. Can you relate to that? It's a challenge that I see leaders at all levels, from frontline managers all the way through to the C-suite, frequently wrestling with. And in those scenarios, my recommendation is this: address the issue, not the incident. See, underperformance in the workplace is rarely about one particular thing. Usually, it's an accumulation of small things that are tasks that are mostly completed, but not fully. You know, it might be being late to meetings, not all the time, but just often enough, right? It may be being available to collaborate and things going well in the room when you do, but it's not fully following through on the commitments that you make in those scenarios. See, underperformance, it's less about an event, and usually it's more about a theme that emerges across one's work. Now, when addressing underperformance, too often leaders focus in on the events that make up the theme rather than the theme itself. And you know what? It's kind of understandable. See, when we are trained as leaders to deliver feedback, which is the mechanism by which we deal with performance issues, we are taught to be specific. You know, me, myself, when I'm training leaders to deliver effective feedback, well, I am encouraging them, and I'll often say the more specific the feedback, the more meaningful it becomes. So in an effort to deliver that feedback, that specific feedback, too often leaders will hone in on a specific incident. And you know what? That might be effective if the one incident is in isolation. It's kind of running counter to the other broader themes of high performance for that one individual. But if it's a persistent failure to meet expectations, focusing on issues rarely results in insight or behavior change. See, here's the reason. Incidents will always be accompanied by mitigating or extenuating circumstances. It's too easy for the individual to say, yes, but in this instance, right, insert reason. There may be a traffic accident on the way to work. Maybe the client didn't deliver all the information that's necessary. Maybe you had a team member who was sick. And what makes it hard is that so often there is a legitimacy to each circumstance. It can be really hard for the leader to refute the reasoning or the justification for subpar performance. However, circumstances can become just that. Excuses, all right, or a justification for underperformance, but not the underlying reason for it. See, when leaders focus on incidents, the legitimacy of circumstance often leaves attempts to address performance as effective as trying to pull a root out too quickly, a weed out too quickly, only to have the stem of the weed break in your hand and leave the roots behind. Have you ever done that before? See, the roots, they're only simply going to sprout another weed at some later time. The roots need to be removed in order for the weed not to grow back. And it's kind of the same with workplace performance and issues in the workplace. See, when we are dealing with persistent underperformance, leaders need to deal with the root cause. They need to focus on the issue rather than the incident. And that requires stepping back and looking at patterns of behavior across multiple incidents, rather than focusing on one incident and one behavior in isolation. See, just like the roots of a weed that lie beneath the surface of the ground, so do patterns of behavior, maybe you have to dig a little bit. Punctuality issues may be the result of a lack of planning. Collaboration issues might seem or stem from not defining accountable actions and timeframes. Failing to deliver on projects may trace back to a failure of anticipating challenges and developing contingencies. These issues usually are ones of foresight, of forward planning, anticipating, prioritizing, and being proactive. For many people, these behaviors just don't come naturally, and often they aren't consciously aware of their deficiency in these areas. It's your job as a leader to help them step back and bring these issues and patterns into their awareness so they can do something about it. Now, this could be as simple as asking people to describe their process. Ask them, what's the process you go through before you leave the house? Or before you meet with a client on a project, before you begin planning for a project? If they struggle to answer, and you can tell that they're making things up on the spot, well, you know that they are lacking intentionality in their behavior and in their approach. Now, as W.E. Deming said at one point, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, a step-by-step process, then you actually don't know what you're doing. And if people don't know what they're doing, it's hard for them to meet expectations. Now, most people know how to complete a task, but the issue usually lies in their thinking about the task, or maybe in the behaviors that are leading up to the task. See, without intentional process prior, there can be no intentional completion. However, once you've helped them to articulate a process, it allows them to do two things. One, they can follow the process, and two, they can enhance it. And once they're aware of the underlying issue and they have a process to follow and improve, well, then it's up to them. Provide accountability as their leader, provide support where required, but ultimately the ball is in their court. You've created the conditions now for them to strengthen and improve their performance. And if they do, great. If they don't, well, it might be time for a different type of conversation. One about whether or not the current workplace is the right one for them. But either way, here is this reality, all right? If you're addressing an issue for the third or fourth time, it's no longer a performance issue. It's a leadership issue, and it's up to you to solve it. So, whereabouts do you need to address an issue rather than an incident? Who's the person you need to have that conversation with? Go and do that. And until next time, lead well.